We all have the one show that gets us. If you're here watching my stuff, then that means that you too at some point in your life got caught in the mesmerizing rabbit hole that is anime and manga. Maybe it was Dragon Ball Z, maybe it was One Piece, maybe it was Pokemon. We all have a first show, and for me it was Naruto. Back when YouTube wasn't a thing yet and online copyright was a mere legend, 10-year-old me used to spend a lot of time on Google videos, where some brave soul was regularly uploading the entirety of Naruto, in German, unlabeled, with every episode being cut into multiple 2-minute segments. So, yeah, it was quite the experience. But nonetheless, I watched all of it like that the first time around, and it introduced me to anime as a whole. Naruto had, therefore, always a special quality to me, a sort of nostalgic appreciation. But, as you certainly know, and as the years have gone by, time hasn't been kind to Naruto and its franchise. With a highly criticized final arc and ending, followed by a sequel that is, at best, controversial, Naruto as a name and a franchise has lost a lot of the glow it started out with. And I, being the mega fan that I used to be, had front row seats to all of it. So, I think it's time that we take a good look at Naruto and the tragedy of its downfall. In 1997, a young, aspiring mangaka named Masashi Kishimoto published a one-shot chapter of a mischievous fox boy stealing a painting. 2 years later, in 1999, the shonen battle manga Naruto, based on that one-shot, began publication and quickly grew into a massive success. Early Naruto is what many consider the peak of the series, and it is easy to see why. The character designs are bold and expressive. The plot hook is incredibly simple, become the ninja president, and the power system is literally throwing down gang signs to spit fire. And more than anything else, the series had a sort of intimacy with its scope. DBZ had opened the floodgates for shonen anime to feature planetary, devastating powers and battles. And while that was great, it was easy to feel like a lot of battles were losing the more intimate meaning a one-on-one fight should have. In comparison, the clashes the young ninja engage in were tiny. Fights often revolved around very few combatants, and every attack had a specific purpose besides just big kaboom. In short, the events of Naruto had a focused, small-scale feel to it that was pretty sought after in a post-Goku world. Another strength of early Naruto was its distinct focus on ideologies and the discourse that those bring with them. Any antagonist the main cast faced would always be represented by a specific way of thinking that was often diametrically opposed to that of our boy Naruto. And equally as often, the central ideas of these ideologies would revolve around life as a ninja and the conflict between empathy and violence these people find themselves in. This tendency gave the story the appearance of a sort of thematic weight that wasn't all that common at the time and was very appealing to the younger generations trying to go into more adult themes. However, appearance is the key word here. While the series' readiness to engage with these topics certainly is praiseworthy, its actual approach to it is, lacking. It opens up discussions about vast issues and then handles that discourse with all the grace and maturity of a petulant preteen. For example, the ideologies the major villains bring into their respective arcs are interesting, but they almost all reach the same conclusion. Right before they leave the story, they realize how wrong they were and adopt Naruto's more friendship-oriented mindset. This is detrimental in many ways. For one, it devalues the villain in question. The ideals they held stop seeming like fundamental worldviews and more like moods that can change on a whim. For younger people like Gaara, one might argue that it's reasonable as he didn't have those ideals for too long anyway. But once you get to people like Tsunade, who've had a certain viewpoint for decades and have layers upon layers of trauma attached to it, it really begins stretching the believability of not just these ideologies, but also these characters in general. If a single yelling child can make you rethink your entire life's philosophy and cause you to make an ideological 180 all in a single afternoon, then your beliefs probably weren't all that strong to begin with. Additionally, it makes a lot of the solutions to these ideological problems cartoonishly simple. No matter what the villain wants or thinks, in most cases, Naruto can just talk to them about friendship and cooperation, and, one flashback to the swing set to sadness and sorrow later, the villain will completely understand and change. It turns an interesting dilemma into a naive, juvenile fantasy and squanders any potential that approach could have had. But taking a step back, perhaps this criticism is not all that important. After all, Naruto is a series aimed at kids, and while this handling of its content is disappointing, one could argue that it is serviceable for what it wants to be. And that seems to at least ring true somewhat, as the original run of Naruto is consistently considered the golden age of the series. And indeed, I personally enjoyed this part quite a lot as a kid. The philosophical aspects were present enough for me to feel smart watching it, but not realized enough to overwhelm me. The story also had a lot of identity. The hand signs and defined specific jutsu, the ninja aesthetic with unique and varied character designs, and the one-on-one small-scale combat were all things that this series held close and utilized well. And so, the young section of Naruto ended with me and all its other fans eagerly awaiting what would come next. As Naruto returned from his 2-year pilgrimage, now a tall teen, things changed. It was gradual at first. The first arc in this part focuses on rescuing Gaara from anime ISIS, and while it's a relatively exciting story arc, it completely pushes both Naruto's goal of becoming Hokage and his wish of finding Sasuke into the background. Sure, both are mentioned, but nothing in this arc furthers either of those goals. But okay, only doing this for one arc wouldn't really be a problem. But that's the thing. This arc begins Kishimoto's tendency of gradually abandoning not only core aspects of his characters, but core appeals and values of his story altogether. Sasuke only occasionally gets dangled into the story without any real consequence, and while Naruto still screams about becoming Hokage, he never actually does anything that directly brings him closer to that goal. He trains and becomes stronger, but we're never led to believe that his chances of becoming Hokage have increased in any capacity. More and more, the actual core values that the series was popular for get pushed back to get replaced with a storyline focusing on the Akatsuki. But because they only become a main threat after the time skip, and because their existence is relatively separate from both of Naruto's goals, they end up feeling less like the main plot and more like a detour. Nonetheless, the series was still relatively enjoyable at this point. The new abilities that got introduced were exciting, the Akatsuki, while unrelated to the series' main goal, were competent and interesting villains, and the show overall still felt like Naruto. At this point, I had discovered Naruto on TV, and watched most of early Shippuden by recording the episodes as they would air while I was at school, and then watching them in the evening. And so, Naruto trudged along, slightly less engaging than before, but still the show I wanted and liked. And this continued until it hit a surprising peak. The Pain arc is what many consider the absolute zenith of Shippuden. I'd go even further and say that it is the single best piece of content Kishimoto ever produced in Naruto. And while I will elaborate that statement in a future video, for today, what's important to understand is how monumental this arc was for the series. This is the first time in the story where Naruto feels like a matured adult. He takes the reins of the story not impulsively, but through calculated effort. The training arc at the Toads feels meaningful and tense as he prepares for the showdown with Akatsuki's leader. Pain, meanwhile, is an antithesis to Naruto's optimistic outlook on global peace and cooperation, and, more crucially, his ideas about the world they live in are eerily reasonable, albeit extreme. He is the perfect culmination of all conflicts so far, and the finale of the arc gives us the exact thing we wanted to see: Naruto finally being recognized and accepted by society. I think it's because of these aspects that many people agree that pain should have been the conclusion of the series, or that, at least, the story should have been restructured to end shortly after pain. But of course, Naruto didn't end there. No, it went on into one of the most infamous arcs in all of shonen, and took one of the most spectacular nosedives in quality. The fourth great Shinobi War arc is a mess. This arc represents the ultimate crumbling of everything Naruto was, so let's look at it for a second. The war arc is, in of itself, the antithesis to the small-scale focused skirmishes Naruto was known for. Now, jutsu were not used to create a specific advantage in battle or pinpoint a weakness. No, now most jutsu were just a variation of mountain-busting explosions that got more and more extreme as the arc progressed. By the time the clash reaches its climax, giant explosions are the norm, and no attack has any meaning beyond big kaboom. And while such exaggerated displays of destruction can be entertaining for a while, the war arc messes that up as well. To illustrate, the war arc takes up 1/3 of Naruto. No, not 1/3 of Shippuden, but 1/3 of the entire story. It is the longest arc in the series, yet it only covers the events of about 2 days, meaning that the pace of this arc is absolutely fucked. It's a dragged on, painfully slow event where Kishimoto attempts to grab our attention by haphazardly bringing back every somewhat popular character from the dead. It feels less like a climactic arc with a fast-paced climax, and rather more like a roller coaster going at a snail's pace to make sure you appreciate all the vulgar graffitis down on the rails. And this is where the war commits its biggest sin. It completely dismantles and infantilizes any thematic competence Naruto had left. As we said earlier, Naruto always had a tendency to tackle subjects that were way too mature for what it could actually offer in terms of thematic discourse. But up to this point, the subjects could still be approached in a simple way without making it totally pointless. In fact, the themes of pacifism and global reformative cooperation during the Pain arc actually developed into a fairly interesting conversation. However, the key here is that all these subjects were pretty lofty and vague, so that Naruto could get away with giving lofty and vague answers. But while it is still a vast subject as well, war has a lot more concrete real-life applications and implications as a subject, and therefore, a story that tackles it should be ready to do so properly. But that's the problem. The story doesn't depict the war in any meaningful way, it's just treated as a long string of fights with only glimpses of the evocative imagery war stories are often associated with. It tries to tackle an even more mature theme than before, but Kishimoto doesn't adapt his writing in the slightest. The themes grow up, but Kishimoto doesn't. The result is that the war arc has really nothing to say past just being an excuse for a lot of action. And that would be fine. It's shonen, it's fine to have a lot of action. But Naruto constantly pretends to be more thematically competent than it really is. We still get all the trademark speeches, but when contrasted with the incredible depth and understanding a theme like war necessitates, those speeches feel more meaningless than ever. It's literally just a bunch of teenagers busting out big words they found on Wikipedia to sound smart. This is even further worsened by the fact that the story completely loses focus. While Sasuke is brought back, we never get to see Naruto actually becoming Hokage, only receiving glimpses of it in the final chapter. Hell, in the anime, we don't even get that, making this entire journey a pointless mess. When Naruto started, we bought into this story for one and maybe two reasons. One being him becoming Hokage, and the second later reason for him to bring Sasuke back. And now, Sasuke may be back, but Naruto becoming Hokage is completely forgotten about. It makes the entire journey pointless. It feels like we wasted our time watching this. And so, Naruto ended, not with a bang, but with a confused, messy whimper. Before we head into the final section of this video, I would like to talk about the concept of the artistic vision. While most definitions you'll find are somewhat vague, in essence, artistic vision refers to the idea that every piece of art is imbued with a certain amount of the author's intent, passion, and desire. It's basically when a story, a picture, a movie, or whatever makes you really feel and appreciate that this was created by a human being who wanted to express a specific idea in a specific way. And it's a term that has gained importance over time. Now, in 2019, every work of art is also a highly commercialized product. And that's good, as artists should be compensated for their work. However, it puts us in a position where we have to ask ourselves at what point art simply becomes nothing but a product. And one way to go about that is by considering the artistic vision behind a work of art and how much it holds up to its own intentions, ideas, and passions. Basically, can we determine that this piece of art was made by a human being wanting to say something? Or is it just the product of a corporate meeting? Sometime after the manga ended, but before the anime ended, it was decided that Naruto would in fact not end, but instead be continued in a story about his son, Boruto. And I could tell you a lot about the sequel series. I could talk about how some of the character work is actually fairly interesting. I could gush over some of the animators working on it. But none of that matters. It's all irrelevant because Boruto isn't a story. Boruto is a product. And I'm not saying that because I think the series is pure dog shit. It actually tries some pretty cool stuff between its characters and fights, and it's overall an okay serviceable shonen. But it doesn't matter because this is the most transparent, shameless cash grab I have seen in the anime landscape, and I have no desire to treat or analyze it in the way I would an actual piece of writing. Big words, I know, so let's look at it. The first thing you'll notice is the look of the show. Namely, how everyone and everything looks, walks, and talks like a cheap Naruto bootleg. One of the strengths of Naruto's character designs was that each design felt distinct and said something about the characters in question. In Boruto, none of these designs say anything beyond, hey, I'm this guy's kid, or hey, I'm this guy but older. They are clearly meant to be emulations of the original characters as opposed to being anything worthwhile themselves. Their personalities are similar, mostly being either reversions of their parents' personalities or extensions of it. It feels less like a new generation and more like an attempt to trick kids into watching it because it looks like Naruto. This extends to the plots as well, with many of the presented stories following similar beats as older, more familiar arcs. The villains all basically either ape Kaguya or the Akatsuki, and it all just feels like we've seen this before, but with a more interesting cast. This can all be traced back to the artistic vision. Naruto was a story of a child fighting for recognition in a society that didn't want him, and that story was being created by one young mangaka wanting to tell it. It was his story, and therefore, even when it stumbled, it was the creation of Kishimoto's passion and artistry. But Boruto? Boruto isn't a story that needed to be told. Nothing about this, neither the manga nor the anime, makes me believe that at any point a creative human being went, yes, this is a story I have to put on paper. Rather, every element of it, from the aesthetic to the characters to the plot, reeks of corporate greed, wanting to cash in on a franchise hype and nostalgia. Boruto isn't a story because there is no one who really wanted to tell it. Instead, it's just a commercial machine cranking out more content for a franchise that should have ended when the creator ended it. If you want the most painful example of this, ask yourself, what happened to Naruto's dream? To him becoming Hokage? What was the culmination of 14 years of investment into that goal? Well, after the original manga skipped it, we do get it here in Boruto, in a joke episode, where he misses the ceremony, because he gets knocked out by his daughter. The premise of the entire story, the inciting motivation for our main character, the whole reason why me and many others stuck by this story for 1.5 decades, all of that is degraded into a single unfunny punchline. This is what Boruto is to Naruto. A disrespectful, shameless beating of a dead horse that really just needs to rest. Boruto isn't the worst series out there. Hell, it's not even the worst Naruto content. Filler exists. And if you enjoy it, great! But to me, it's the perfect example of a soulless product pretending to be fiction in order to continue a bygone legacy. It's a reminder that Naruto is dead, and that instead of letting it rest with some dignity, corporate greed would rather dance on its grave and milk it for all it's worth. Boruto, by all intents and purposes, should not exist, but yet it does. But I don't want to end this video on a somber note. Naruto may have died, but it got me, and maybe some of you, into anime and manga. And considering how many fantastic stories I've experienced since then, I think that, all in all, it was worth it. And as always, thank you for watching, take care, and be safe. Bye. P.S. I know this is a very different type of video than usual, and this will be the only time I make a negative video. I really don't like "this sucks" kind of content, but in this case it was kind of a story that's very dear to me, so I want to make an exception. But don't worry, I'm not gonna just shit on stuff non-stop from now on. This will be an exception. Next time we're already back to praising the hell out of something, so stay tuned. Bye, I'll see you next time. I love you so much. Bye bye!